The Prime Minister has suffered personal backlash over his handling of the bushfire crisis as the coalition falls behind Labor in the latest news poll. Let's go live now to political editor Andrew Clennell. Andrew, what can you tell us about the result?
Well, Danica, it's a pretty disastrous result for Scott Morrison, has to be said, even though the two-party preferred figures, given the month Scott Morrison has had, aren't actually that bad. He's behind 49-51. But what will alarm the government and the Prime Minister in particular will be the fact that his disapproval rating is 59%. A staggering 59% of people do not think Scott Morrison is doing a good job at the moment. And he's fallen behind Anthony Albanese as preferred Prime Minister, 43 to 39%. Now, this is quite an extraordinary result when you consider he won the miracle election result just last May, about 9-10 months ago, and suddenly you find yourself with a disapproval rating of 59%. It shows what a disastrous time he's had over the bushfires, a month from hell, as I wrote last week. And from Albanese's point of view, he must be laughing because essentially he hasn't come up with a single policy. It's like Morrison's behind an empty chair at the moment in terms of the preferred Prime Minister stakes. One person from the government did say to me this morning that, or point out to me that the last time the government was behind 51-49 in a news poll, they won an election. And that much is true. But the danger to Scott Morrison, I think, is the view of his colleagues and whether they start to lose confidence now. Not a great position to be in as leader as you go into the first sitting week of Parliament in a couple of weeks' time.
No, certainly not. I guess, Andrew, the question is, what is the way forward for Scott Morrison from here?
Well, yes, it's been an interesting performance from Scott Morrison. Unfortunately for him, I think the bushfires crisis has become about him, and I think he's really feeling that. And I think we can hear that in a phone conversation he had with firefighters as he was congratulating them over the weekend. Quite an emotional phone call that Deputy Prime Minister Michael McCormack posted on social media. Let's have a listen to some of that now.
Michael and I and Susan and everyone else to go and get done what needs to be done in the future. We're not going to get distracted by all the noise and the rubbish and the crap, just like you don't get distracted by the noise and the rubbish and the crap. You just focus on what you've got to do, and I give you my absolute commitment. That's what I and Michael and Susan are going to do. So thanks, guys. You're a credit to your country and your community.
So, Danica, we can hear then, quite an emotional phone call, and fair enough for the PM on that front, but it still seems to be all about the PM. Now, how do you make a bushfires crisis all about yourself as a political leader? The only way it should be about you is your ratings lifting as you seem to respond well to it. Instead, he's saying, I don't worry about the noise and rubbish and crap either. Now, essentially, the other thing that's happened and that needs to continue to happen from Scott Morrison is a change in his language. On January 2nd, I asked him a question about climate change and the effect on the fires. Let's have a listen to that question and answer now. Will this be the norm? That's the question, really. Will this be the norm, this sort of fire season? Do you fear that as Prime Minister?
Well, this season has been quite extraordinary in terms of the very lengthy drought that has preceded it. Now, let's hope in the future, and let's certainly hope as we go through this year, that we will see that drought end. And that will hopefully ensure that we've got a different situation as we confront next year's fire season. But other issues of how you manage hazard reduction and things of that nature are important.
So there we have Mr Morrison saying, let's hope in the near future we don't get these sort of conditions. Let's see what he had to say about the prospect of these fire seasons going on yesterday.
Well, I think we've got to prepare for a new normal. And the new normal, I think there is a community expectation now that there'd be a more direct ability for the Commonwealth, particularly through the Australian Defence Forces, to be able to take action.
And Andrew, the government is announcing an extra $50 million for wildlife protection out of the fires this morning. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, it's a real chance again to get on the front foot. We've seen rather disturbing images, haven't we, Danica, of koalas and kangaroos really suffering out there, dying, being injured, etc. They're devoting $50 million to map the damage and to act to safeguard populations. Susan Lees, the Environment Minister, is putting together a team of ecologists people from universities, the CSIRO, and people from state and territory governments to work together in order to safeguard those populations under the guidance of the Threatened Species Commissioner, Sally Box. So on a number of fronts now, there are a number of announcements, there are a number of roundtables, as was foreshadowed yesterday, between federal and state ministers as they seek to address this crisis. But it's a long road ahead for Scott Morrison now to connect again with the Australian public. He won the election largely because people thought that he was on their side. The danger out of this fires crisis is that people start thinking you're not on our side, you're on your own side. So that's the political problem that he has to address, Danica.
Andrew Clennell, thank you.